I came to carry her groceries, just a neighbor doing a favor. But when she whispered, "Stay a little longer," my world tilted. What she did next would haunt me every night after. I had just turned 23 that summer, the kind of age where everything felt like it was on the cusp of changing, but nothing had quite shifted yet. I was Harlan Voss, living in that tiny studio apartment above the old laundromat on Elmwood Lane in Portland, Oregon. The place was a mess of mismatched furniture and half-unpacked boxes, with the constant hum of washers and dryers vibrating through the floorboards like a reminder that life kept spinning whether I was ready or not. I'd graduated from community college a few months back, no big fanfare, just a certificate in graphic design that I hoped would lead somewhere better than the odd jobs I was picking up. Mowing lawns, fixing fences, anything to scrape together enough for a deposit on a real place downtown. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of street where everyone knew everyone's business but pretended not to, lined with aging brick buildings and trees that dropped leaves like forgotten memories. Mrs. Lenora Quaid lived at the end of the block in that Victorian house with its peeling blue shutters and a front garden that looked wild on purpose, vines climbing the fence as if they were guarding something precious. I didn't know her story in detail, just the whispers from the locals at the corner store. Her husband had died suddenly a couple of years ago, a heart attack that left her alone in that big house. She was older than me. That much was clear. Late 30s, maybe 40, with a grace that came from years of holding things together when they wanted to fall apart. Her dark wavy hair was often pulled back loosely, and her eyes, deep and thoughtful, seemed to carry the weight of unspoken sorrows. I'd see her walking her scruffy terrier, Milo, or carrying groceries from her rusty sedan, always offering a polite wave but never lingering for chat. We weren't close. I was just the young guy down the street who'd helped a neighbor or two with yard work. That afternoon, the sky hung low and gray, thick with clouds that made the air feel sticky and heavy, like it was holding its breath for the storm to break. I was walking back from the hardware store, a plastic bag of nails swinging from my hand for a fence job later, when I spotted her on the sidewalk. She was wrestling with 3 oversized shopping bags, the handles digging into her palms, one bag threatening to tip over onto the curb. Her light cotton dress swayed with each strained step, and there was a weariness in her posture that tugged at something in me. Maybe it was how my mom always said to lend a hand, or maybe it was just seeing someone carry more than they should alone. "Hey, need some help with those?" I called out, quickening my pace without a second thought. It felt natural, but as I got closer, I noticed the subtle flush on her cheeks, like she'd been caught in a moment of vulnerability she hadn't planned. She looked up, her expression a mix of surprise and relief. "Oh, Harlan, that's thoughtful. They're heavier than they look. I must have overdone it at the store." Her voice was gentle, with a warm undertone that cut through the muggy air, making the moment feel less ordinary. I took the bags from her, feeling the immediate pull in my arms from the weight of cans, jars, and whatever else she'd packed in there. "No worries at all. Lead the way." We walked side by side, the bags crinkling against my legs, a quiet rhythm to our steps. Milo started barking excitedly from behind the fence as we neared her house, his tail a blur of motion. She fumbled with the gate key, and I followed her up the porch steps, each one creaking like an old friend welcoming us back. The door swung open to a home that felt lived in and inviting, the scent of fresh-baked bread mingling with herbal tea, wrapping around me like a subtle embrace. Books were piled on end tables, a soft knitted blanket thrown over the arm of the couch, and family photos lined the mantel, glimpses of a life that had once been fuller. She directed me to the kitchen counter, and I set the bags down with a satisfying thud, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Thank you, really," she said, smoothing her dress as if to compose herself. "I could have managed, but it's comforting to have assistance now and then." There was a pause, her eyes flicking to the window where raindrops began to speckle the glass, tentative at first. "Looks like the storm's starting. You got an umbrella?" I asked, already turning toward the door, not wanting to overstay. She shook her head, biting her lip in that way people do when weighing a decision. The rain picked up, tapping insistently on the roof. Then her voice dropped to a near whisper, pulling me back. Come in, I'll show you my secret." The words lingered, unexpected, stirring a curiosity I couldn't ignore. My hand paused on the doorknob. "Your secret?" She offered a small, almost shy smile, not playful but revealing a layer of herself she rarely shared. "Nothing too mysterious, just something upstairs I've kept to myself, since you're here." She gestured down the hallway, and against my better judgment, I followed, the rain now a steady drum outside. We climbed the narrow stairs, each step groaning under our weight, leading to a door at the end of the hall. She unlatched it, and we ascended another steeper flight into the attic, dimly lit by a bare bulb swaying gently. What I saw wasn't the clutter I'd imagined, no forgotten relics or dust-covered boxes. Instead, it was an artist's haven, easels holding canvases in various states of completion, brushes in jars, palettes streaked with vibrant hues. The sharp tang of oil paint and turpentine filled the space, alive and intimate. "This is it," she said, stepping aside, her voice carrying a hint of vulnerability. "My paintings. I haven't shared them with anyone since my husband passed. He was the only one who knew about this side of me." The artworks drew me in, abstract storms of blues and grays evoking turbulent oceans, interspersed with serene landscapes like a fog-shrouded forest or a lake at first light. They weren't just pretty. They pulsed with emotion, each brushstroke a window into her inner world. "These are amazing," I said, moving closer to one, tracing the lines with my eyes. "Why hide them?" She leaned against a wooden beam, her arms crossed loosely. "They're too personal. After he was gone, it all felt exposed, like opening a wound. But today, perhaps I needed to share." Her words hung there, and we talked, about how she'd started painting in her early 30s while working as a librarian, how at 38 now, it was her quiet refuge from the emptiness. I opened up a little too, about my graphic design tinkering, the uncertainty of what came next. The conversation eased into something comfortable, yet beneath it, her glances lingered, and a stray hair she tucked away felt charged with unspoken meaning. The rain softened, but we stayed, descending for tea, she offered. In the kitchen, as she poured, our hands brushed, accidental, yet electric. She withdrew quickly, a faint blush rising. "Sorry," she whispered. "It's okay," I replied, my pulse quickening, the room suddenly smaller. We sat, talking of books and dreams, her life a tapestry of steady routines laced with solitude. No children, just Milo and her library shifts. I shared my makeshift plans, feeling a bridge forming where none should. As hours slipped by, the unpacked bags forgotten, she rose to the window, gazing at the drenched street. "Harlan, do you ever sense life slipping past, waiting for something undefined?" Her question pierced me. "Constantly." She turned, her eyes intense. "Stay for dinner. It's only fair after your help." I hesitated, knowing I should decline, but nodded. We prepared pasta together, elbows grazing in the cramped kitchen, Milo at our feet. Over the meal, she spoke of her husband's sudden loss, the house's echoing vastness, painting's insufficient balm. I listened, offering my own doubts, the gap between us narrowing dangerously. Night deepened, rain renewing its assault. "It's pouring. The couch is yours if you'd like. No need to get drenched." My heart raced. It seemed harmless, yet her averted gaze hinted otherwise. I accepted, settling under a borrowed blanket, sleep evading me amid the house's creaks and her upstairs footsteps. What was happening? She was a widow, older, and I was out of place, yet it felt inescapably right, terrifying in its pull. This was only the beginning, but he still had no idea how quickly things could spiral beyond control. The morning broke over Elmwood Lane with a hesitant light, slipping through the lace curtains of Lenora's living room and painting delicate shadows across the hardwood. I woke on the couch, my neck stiff from the lumpy cushions. The blanket twisted around my legs like it was trying to hold me in place. For a split second, I forgot where I was. The hum of the laundromat from my own apartment replaced by the faint creak of an old house settling. Then the smell of fresh coffee hit me, rich and grounding, followed by the soft clatter of dishes from the kitchen. Milo, sprawled near the hearth, lifted his scruffy head, his tail thumping lazily against the floor as he registered my movement. My phone read 7:12 a.m., and outside, the world was still damp from last night's rain, the sidewalks glistening under a sky that couldn't decide if it was done crying. "Morning, Harlan," Lenora called from the kitchen doorway, her voice warm but carrying a trace of caution, like she was testing the air between us. She stood there in a loose gray sweater that slipped off one shoulder, jeans faded at the knees, her dark hair a little mussed from sleep. She held 2 mugs, steam curling upward, and there was something about her. Maybe the way the morning light caught the faint lines around her eyes, or how she stood with a quiet confidence, that made her beautiful in a way that felt raw, unguarded. She was 38, she'd mentioned last night, and those years showed in the way she carried herself, like someone who'd learned to navigate life's sharp edges. My 23 years felt flimsy in comparison, like I was still sketching the outline of who I might become. "Didn't mean to sleep in," I said, rubbing the back of my neck, my voice rough from sleep. I sat up, trying to shake off the haze, the memory of last night's dinner and her offer to stay lingering like a half-remembered dream. "You didn't. I'm just up early, habit from too many quiet mornings." She crossed the room, handing me a mug, and our fingers brushed, a fleeting warmth that sent a jolt through me. Neither of us pulled away as quickly as we should have. "It's black. No cream in the house, sorry." "Black's fine," I lied, taking a sip to hide the way my pulse had quickened. I usually loaded my coffee with sugar, but right now I'd have drunk it straight from the pot if she'd offered. We settled at the small dining table, the same one where we'd eaten pasta last night, and for a moment we just sipped in silence. The air felt heavier than it should, like it was carrying the weight of everything we hadn't said. Her eyes flicked to mine, then away, and I wondered if she felt it too, this unspoken shift, like we'd crossed some invisible line and weren't sure how to step back. "Thanks for staying," she said finally, her voice softer now, almost tentative. "It's been a while since I had someone here. Makes the house feel less empty." There was a catch in her words, like she was admitting something she hadn't planned to. "Anytime," I said, and I meant it, though the weight of that word, anytime, felt dangerous, like I was promising more than I understood. "It's no trouble. I like it here." The words sounded simple, but they weren't. Her house, with its cluttered warmth and quiet secrets, felt like a refuge from the chaos of my own life. My tiny apartment, my aimless job at the hardware store, the nagging sense that I was supposed to have it all figured out by now. She smiled, but it was quick, fleeting, her fingers tightening around her mug. "You don't have to say that, Harlan. You've got your own world, friends, plans. I'm sure you've got better places to be than here with me." Her words stung, not because they were harsh, but because they assumed I was just being polite. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that being here felt more real than anything else I'd stumbled into lately, but my throat tightened, and I fumbled for the right response. "It's not about that," I said, setting my mug down, my hands restless. "This place, it's peaceful." "You're..." I hesitated, searching for a word that wouldn't scare either of us. "You're easy to be around." Her eyes met mine, and for a heartbeat, the room felt too small, the space between us crackling with something neither of us was ready to name. Then she stood abruptly, gathering the mugs with a quickness that betrayed her nerves. "I've got errands today," she said, her voice steadier now, like she was pulling herself back from the edge. "There's a farmer's market on Crestwood Avenue near the river. I need to grab some things. You want to come?" I should have said no. My shift at the hardware store was looming, and my laundry was piling up back at my place, a silent reminder of responsibilities I kept dodging. But her invitation wasn't just about groceries. It felt like an extension of last night, a thread we weren't ready to cut. "Yeah, sure," I said, standing before I could overthink it. "Let me just text my boss." The market was a short drive across town, set up in a sprawling parking lot by the Willamette River, where the air smelled of wet pavement and fresh produce. Stalls were packed with everything from ripe tomatoes to jars of honey, vendors calling out deals over the hum of the crowd. Lenora moved through it all with a quiet purpose, picking out zucchini and apples, exchanging small talk with sellers like she was a regular. I trailed behind, carrying the reusable bag she handed me, their weight grounding me in the moment. It felt strangely intimate, like we were playing at something domestic, something that didn't belong to us. At a stall piled with handmade pottery, bowls and mugs glazed in deep blues and greens, she paused, her fingers tracing the rim of a small dish. "These are lovely," she murmured, almost to herself. The vendor, an older woman with a silver braid and a warm smile, looked up. "You two make a sweet pair," she said, her eyes crinkling. "Picking out something for your home?" Lenora's laugh was quick, nervous, her cheeks flushing. "Oh no, we're not. He's just helping me carry things." I felt my face heat up, my hands tightening on the bags as I pretended to adjust them. The vendor's comment hung there, a clumsy truth neither of us wanted to touch. We moved on, but I caught Lenora glancing at me, her expression unreadable, like she was wrestling with something she couldn't say. Near the edge of the market, she stopped at a flower stall, her hand hovering over a bundle of sunflowers, their petals bright against the gray sky. "These were his favorite," she said, her voice so quiet I almost missed it. "He'd bring one home when he worked late, just to make me smile." Her fingers brushed the petals, and I saw the shadow of her past flicker across her face, a reminder of the life she'd lost. "Do you want to get one?" I asked, my voice softer than I meant, like I was afraid of breaking the moment. She hesitated, her hand lingering, then shook her head. "No. I'm trying to let some things go." Her words carried a weight I couldn't fully grasp, but I felt it, heavy and real, like the air before a storm. Back at her house, we unloaded the groceries, moving around her small kitchen like we'd done it 100 times. She was quieter now, her movements deliberate, like she was trying to keep herself in check. I didn't push her to talk, but as we finished, she turned to me, a dish towel in her hands. "Harlan, why are you here?" Her voice was direct, almost sharp, but her eyes were searching, vulnerable. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she was getting at. "Helping me, staying over, coming to the market. You're young. You've got a whole life out there. Why spend it with someone like me?" She gestured vaguely at the kitchen, at herself, her voice tinged with something that sounded like doubt, maybe fear. The question hit me hard, stripping away the ease of the morning. Why was I here? It wasn't just neighborly kindness, not anymore. It was her. The way she moved through her pain with quiet strength. The way her eyes held stories I wanted to hear. The way her presence made me feel like I was more than just a kid drifting through life. "I'm not wasting anything," I said, my voice low, steady despite the way my heart was pounding. "I like being around you. You're different. Real." She laughed, a soft, bittersweet sound, stepping closer until I could smell the faint lavender of her shampoo. "Real," she echoed, shaking her head. "You mean a woman who's too old for you, painting alone in her attic?" Her tone was light, but her eyes were serious, searching mine for something I wasn't sure I could give. "You're not too old," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "And I'm not a kid." My voice was firmer now, almost defiant, and the space between us felt alive, electric, like one wrong move could ignite something neither of us was prepared for. She held my gaze, her breath catching, and for a moment I thought she might close the distance. But she turned back to the counter, breaking the moment. "I'm going to work in the attic for a bit," she said, her voice steadier now. "You're welcome to join me." I followed her upstairs, back to the attic with its canvases and sharp, paint-scented air. She handed me a brush, dipping it into a jar of deep blue, and invited me to try. I'd never painted before, not like this, but I took it, my strokes clumsy against the canvas. She didn't laugh. Instead, she guided my hand, her fingers warm and steady, showing me how to blend the colors into something fluid. We worked in near silence, the only sounds the soft scrape of bristles and the occasional creak of the floorboards, but it felt like we were saying more than words could hold. Hours slipped away, the canvas transforming into a chaotic swirl of blues and greens, not art but something shared, something ours. She stepped back, studying it, then looked at me with a smile that felt like a gift. "You've got a knack for this," she said, and there was warmth in her voice, pride maybe, or something deeper that made my chest tighten. We went downstairs for lunch, simple sandwiches, eaten at the table with Milo dozing nearby. The conversation turned lighter, about old movies she loved, music she'd danced to in her 20s, but every so often our eyes would meet, and the air would shift, heavy with unspoken questions. I knew I had to leave soon. My shift at the hardware store was in a couple of hours, and I couldn't keep pretending the world outside didn't exist. But before I could say anything, she reached out, her hand resting lightly on my arm, her touch lingering longer than it should. "Harlan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what this is, but I'm glad you're here." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that made my throat tighten, like she was offering me a piece of herself she'd kept hidden. "Me too," I said, my voice rough. And I meant it more than I could explain. I wanted to stay, to keep this moment. But I could feel the pull of reality creeping in. My job, my life, the fact that she was a widow, older, carrying a past I couldn't fully understand. She pulled her hand back, her expression shuddering slightly. "You should go." "Your shift." "Yeah," I said, but I didn't move right away. The moment stretched, taut with everything we weren't saying, until I finally grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. On the porch I turned back, and she was there, arms crossed, watching me with an intensity that made my chest ache. Everything's heading toward a moment neither of them saw coming. What she does next will leave a mark he'll carry forever. The evening air hit me like a slap as I stood on Lenora's porch, the streetlights along Elmwood Lane flickering on, casting a pale glow over the wet pavement. My shift at the hardware store was less than an hour away, but my legs felt heavy, rooted to the creaking boards beneath me. The weight of her words, "I'm glad you're here," hung in my chest, tugging at something I didn't know how to name. I was Harlan Voss, 23, a guy with no real plan, standing outside a widow's house, my heart pounding like I'd just run a mile. She stood in the doorway, her dark hair catching the warm light from inside, her arms crossed tightly, like she was holding herself together. The distance between us was just a few steps, but it felt like a chasm, one I wasn't sure I had the courage to cross, or if I even should. "Lenora," I said, my voice rougher than I meant, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "I don't know what this is, but I don't want to just walk away." It was raw, unguarded, the kind of thing you say when you're standing on the edge of something and can't see the bottom. My hands were stuffed in my pockets, fingers curling into fists to keep them steady. Her eyes widened, just a fraction, and for a heartbeat, I thought she'd close the door, retreat back into the safety of her world. But she didn't. She took a single step forward, her bare feet brushing the edge of the porch, her cotton dress swaying slightly. "Harlan, you're young," she said, her voice steady, but threaded with something fragile, like glass about to crack. "You've got your whole life ahead of you, places to go, people to meet. This, whatever this is, it's not simple. I'm not simple." She looked down, her fingers tightening on her arms, and I could see the weight of her 38 years in the way she stood, carrying a past I could only glimpse. "I know," I said, stepping closer, narrowing the gap until I could smell the faint lavender of her shampoo, the same scent that had lingered in the attic. I'm not looking for simple, I want to be here. My heart was hammering now, loud enough I was sure she could hear it. At 23, I'd had my share of fleeting connections, girls my age, late-night talks that never went deeper than surface level, but this was different. Lenora was different. She was a woman who'd loved and lost, who painted her pain into canvases hidden in her attic, who made me feel like I was more than just a kid drifting through life, and that scared me as much as it pulled me in. She looked up, her eyes locking onto mine, and I saw the storm there, the push and pull of wanting something and knowing it came with a cost. She was a widow, older, someone who'd built walls to keep the world at arm's length, and here I was, some guy from down the street, chipping away at them without meaning to. "Come inside," she said, her voice so soft it was almost swallowed by the evening breeze. "Just for a minute." I followed her back into the house, the door clicking shut behind us with a finality that made my stomach twist. The living room was dim, lit only by a single lamp in the corner, its light pooling across the hardwood and catching the edges of the furniture. Milo stirred from his spot by the couch, his eyes glinting as he watched us. But he didn't move, like he sensed the air was too heavy for interruption. The house felt alive in its quiet, the creak of the floorboards under our steps, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, all of it underscoring the silence between us. Lenora didn't sit, didn't offer tea or anything to fill the space. She stood by the mantel, her fingers tracing the edge of a framed photo I couldn't make out from where I stood, a man's face maybe, or a moment from a life that wasn't mine. "I haven't done this in a long time," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes fixed on the frame. "Let someone in. Not since... him." Her husband's absence was a presence in itself, a shadow that lingered in every corner of this house, in the paintings upstairs, in the way she held herself like she was afraid of breaking. "You don't have to explain," I said, stepping closer, stopping just short of touching her. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I kept my hands at my sides, my fingers curling into my palms. "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give." She turned then, her eyes meeting mine, and there was something raw in them, something that stripped away the distance between us. "That's the thing, Harlan," she said, her voice cracking just enough to let the pain slip through. "I think I am ready, and that terrifies me." Her words hit like a wave, knocking the air out of me. She was standing so close now, I could see the faint freckles across her nose, the way her breath hitched as she spoke. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "It scares me too," I admitted, my voice low, almost lost in the quiet. "I'm not supposed to feel this way about someone like you." The words felt clumsy, too blunt, but they were true. She was older, wiser, carrying a life I couldn't fully grasp, a widow who'd loved deeply and lost everything. I was just a guy with a part-time job and a sketch pad full of half-finished ideas, standing in her living room, feeling like I'd stumbled into something bigger than myself. She laughed, a soft, broken sound that held both pain and something lighter, like relief. "Someone like me," she repeated, shaking her head, her hair falling loose around her face. "You mean a woman who spends her nights painting in an attic and talks to her dog like he's her best friend?" Her tone was teasing, but her eyes were serious, searching mine for an answer I wasn't sure I had. "No," I said, my voice steadier now, the words coming from somewhere deep. "I mean someone who's been through more than I can imagine and still makes the world feel brighter, like it's worth sticking around for." It was the most honest thing I'd ever said, and it left me exposed, like I'd handed her a piece of myself I couldn't take back. Her breath caught, and for a moment we stood frozen, the silence stretching between us like a tightrope, taut and trembling. Then she moved, crossing the room in 2 quick steps, her hand finding my arm, her touch warm and deliberate, anchoring me in place. "Harlan," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I don't know if this is right, but I don't want you to go." I looked down at her hand, then back at her face, her eyes wide and vulnerable, offering something she'd kept locked away for years. My heart was racing, every instinct screaming to pull back, to walk away before we crossed a line we couldn't uncross. But I couldn't. My hand moved before I could think, my fingers brushing her cheek, soft and tentative, testing the boundary. She didn't pull away, didn't flinch. Her skin was warm under my touch, and I felt the world narrow to just this moment, just us. "Lenora," I said, my voice barely audible, "tell me to stop, and I will." She didn't. Instead, she leaned into my hand, her eyes closing for a heartbeat, like she was letting herself feel something she'd forgotten how to feel. When she opened them, there was a quiet resolve, a decision made in the space between breaths. She stepped closer, her hand sliding up to my shoulder, her fingers curling into the fabric of my shirt. Then, slowly, deliberately, she kissed me. It was soft, careful, like we were both afraid of shattering something fragile. Her lips were warm, tasting faintly of coffee and something sweeter, and for a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. There was just her, the press of her against me, the way her breath mingled with mine. It wasn't rushed or desperate. It was a moment of surrender, of two people letting go of the rules they'd been holding on to. When we pulled back, her forehead rested against mine, her breath uneven, her hands still clutching my shirt like she wasn't ready to let go. "This can't happen again," she said, her voice barely a whisper.